The Richmond Forum is offering subscriptions to its upcoming speaker series featuring Martha Stewart and Coach K. Stream online or attend in person at the Altria Theater. Learn more at richmondforum.org.
Welcome to RVA's Got Issues, a podcast about politics and public affairs in and around Richmond, Virginia. I'm your host, Rich Marr. On this episode, RVA's Got Issues with green energy. We'll talk with expert Adam Sled about how solar, wind, and other renewables are coming to RVA. Will they be enough? Then, RVA's got questions about no soliciting signs. Finally, for our community spotlight, we'll talk with Tariq Karim of the Black Virginia Theater Alliance about how his group is putting on a show and everyone's invited. All that coming up on RVA's Got Issues. On this episode, RVA's got issues with green energy. It seems every week a new solar farm is announced in Chesterfield County. That, plus a huge offshore wind project, could reshape how Virginia will power itself in the future. But there are also sizable challenges. Data centers, like the ones popping up in Hanover County, require huge amounts of energy.
Dropping a 2-square-mile project roughly half the size of the Richmond International Airport in this location is unfathomable.
Everyone moves here and says the same thing. I love that it feels rural. I love supporting Ashland. And then you are just shoving all this industrial stuff around us.
Energy, environment, infrastructure, these are the really critical issues this project presents for the next 20 years.
Adam Sled has worked with public utilities, energy companies, and startups all over the world. He's also executive director of the Dominion Energy Innovation Center, a business hub and incubator located right here in Hanover County. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So solar, wind, renewables, why does it seem like this is all happening now, like really coming to a head?
I would say it's been happening slowly and then suddenly more quickly, right? So maybe you're just noticing it now, but we really saw solar start to take off here. I would say grow steadily from, say, 2008, 2009 onwards. Now is this sort of rapid growth in utility, what we call utility scale solar, which is the sort of large solar farm.
Right. And so there's political pressure, right? There's legal pressure, like there's actual law in place that's forcing this kind of like more recent change, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which was signed a couple years ago, which mandates that the Virginia utilities go net zero. So for Dominion, that's 2045. And then for the other utilities, Appalachian Power, 2050. So we are sort of on this state-mandated path towards net zero carbon for our power generation.
So that's talking about Dominion utilities. Why can't we just put a solar panel on everybody's house? Right. I feel like some people think that's just going to solve everything, right? We'll just fix climate change and solve our energy needs. If you want, you can come by my house later. We'll put one up there. Right? It's super simple. Why don't we just solve everything like that? Right?
Well, the simplest answer is even if you put solar panels on your home, it wouldn't be enough to cover all of the commercial uses that we have, like a data center or even a shopping mall. A shopping mall or an office building typically doesn't have enough roof space to sort of cover it with solar panels and have that cover the entire electricity usage. So even if we somehow magically covered every residential home in solar panels, it still wouldn't be enough to make up for, say, multifamily housing, industrial uses, retail uses, office uses, much less sort of data center uses.
So if I do put a solar panel on my home, because I think people are being approached about this, or some people are doing it, does that help? Is that at least contributing to our energy crisis and our energy problems?
It's probably easier to take kind of like a step back and think about how the grid works and why we talk about different types of solar and different types of renewables that we want to use. The way sort of electricity use works around not just Virginia, but say all over the country is we have different peak times, right? So if you think about it, I dropped my kids off, one at daycare, one at camp. Earlier, I'm out of the house, my wife's out of the house. There's no one in our house using electricity right now. And then later today, we're all going to go home. I'm going to go pick up my kids. We're going to get home. We're going to start making dinner. I might run the laundry.
Everyone's going to get on their devices.
Everyone's going to get on their
charge
devices.
Everything, turn on the TV.
We're going to have TVs on. We're going to have machines whirring. And so the standard, what we call peak load of electricity use, like everywhere, is early evening hours, right? So like, say this time of year, it'd be like 6 to 9 o'clock. That's when we're using the most electricity possible. Now, like mentally try and juxtapose that with how solar works. Rich, how does solar work? When does solar produce electricity?
You're going to say, sunshine. You need sunshine. It happens during the day,
sunshine,
not at night. Yeah.
As soon as the sun starts to go down, we're still using all that electricity at home, but the amount of solar that's being produced by your rooftop, say, has now declined.
And so you could fill the gap by burning stuff, right? Use oil and gas and things, but these are not renewables and might cause problems with pollution and things like that. So how do we meet the gap?
What we have to do is, broadly speaking, continue to look for different ways of producing carbon-free power or storing carbon-free power, right? So battery storage is becoming more and more important. And it's something, if we sort of look out west, if we look at California and Texas, that's kind of where you can see the future of how the power system works, because they're by necessity and by law kind of going after it first, but pairing solar with storage. So largely, I think when we talk about people going solar, there is some benefit to savings, right? And we do have net metering in Virginia, which means you do have the ability to sell your excess capacity back to your utility at essentially a retail rate. So we have net metering that makes it more attractive to do home solar than in some other states, lots of other states. But the primary reason you're going to put solar on your rooftop is like you want to feel good about having solar on your rooftop, and you want some form of energy independence, right? You want to feel like you are able to power your own house. And what I would say is, from like an overall system perspective, if you're going to do it at this point, if you're going to do it and you should put a battery in there as well.
And there are like incentives from the state government, from federal government, maybe to help offset those costs, but it's not going to you're not going to turn yourself into like Little Dominion in Chesterfield County, like generating energy for everyone and making all this money.
We do not have a regulatory structure here that supports that. We do have more incentives coming down the line, and the state announced that we got a $156 million federal award for our Solar for All program that Virginia Energy is going to administer, and that's huge. I mean, that's huge, right? Like that's a lot of money over 5 years that is going to help offset the cost of putting solar on mostly like low income housing and do some community solar projects. So that money is going to, have an immediate impact in the Richmond area.
So Adam, just from a consumer perspective, there's lots of folks who want to help with the climate change problem. They want to be more renewable and less pollution, but they're probably also worried about their rates. Like, what is this move towards renewables going to do? Is it expensive? Is it going to mean that we're going to be paying through the nose for utilities in the future?
There's a real commitment, both from the legislative, sort of the policymaker side and the utility side. There's a real commitment to do this in as cost-effective a manner as possible. And that's why we're moving sort of at the speed we are in the state versus other places. So will people's electricity prices probably go up in the near term as we have a lot of new stuff come online because we just kind of have to build a lot of stuff? Yes. If you are like me and you're thinking about, I'm going to be paying electric bills in this state for the next 30 years, 35 years, hopefully, over time, all that stuff will even out, right? And our goal is always as a state to be sort of on the lower end of what retail electricity prices cost.
You had mentioned earlier about like utility solar, like utility scale solar. Now that's when we're talking about like if you're driving down the highway and you see what used to be a cornfield and now instead they're growing solar panels everywhere, right?
Yes.
And so that is a kind of utility scale that we would need to generate energy at a broader scale. But that, raises all sorts of concerns about land use. There's some people who worry about pollution. What do you say to someone who's worried about their landscape changing that way. That just seems like there's these weird technical farms and stuff out here that there didn't used to be before.
The number of buildings and the height of the buildings will completely destroy the landscape in the rural part of that community.
For the safety of the humans who live in this area, we need to know exactly what the county is planning.
There's a lot of concerns about, is this the best use of land? How are we going to handle water runoff? How are we going to handle the view of the solar panels? I mean, look, I work in Hanover, right? So every day I'm driving through what was a sort of rural and agricultural focused community and is rapidly shifted, even in just the 5 years that I've been commuting there every day. So it's definitely a land use issue, right? And there is definitely a local conversation to be had. It's happening in Hanover all the time, but it's also happening in every other county in Virginia about how we want to use land. And some of that is like, we just have fewer farms than we used to, right? A lot of these farms aren't working farms anymore. A lot of the time people just inherit that land and they don't know what to do with it. And they're not going to turn it into a working farm. And in that case, maybe the best way for them to make money off of it, off that land, while still doing something beneficial for the planet, is letting it become solar power. That is now essentially the cheapest form of energy available. Okay, so it's cheaper than building coal. It's cheaper than building natural gas. It's cheaper than pretty much anything else that exists.
So solar growing big. I think another area of renewable energy that people are paying a lot of attention to is wind power. And that is coming to Virginia as well. Maybe not in the middle of RVA, right? But at least there's a big offshore project that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Right off the coast of Hampton Roads. Or we call it CVOW. It's Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind. So there's 2 test turbines that have been in the water out there, like several miles off the coast for a couple years now. And the construction is just getting rolling. And we expect to have enough power there from in 2026. We should have enough power from there to power 660,000 homes.
Which is, bigger than the city of Richmond by far.
Yeah.
I think it's 3 cities of Richmond. So are there downsides to this? People talk about renewables sometimes like they are, a panacea, but I think there are some concerns about wind turbines. I mean, one of the reasons why people haven't wanted it closer to shore or on land is they're worried about animals, they're worried about pollution, things like that. Are there downsides to wind?
So I think the things that we hear the most often, we're going to kill all the birds. Mm-hmm. Wind turbines are going to kill all the birds. 2, the wind turbines themselves are steel, and then they fail, and they have to be replaced after 20 years. And what are you going to do with all these big, giant steel wind turbines? Marine wildlife, right? So what happens to the fish? What happens to the ocean floor? You're digging up the ocean floor to put these big, giant steel things in the bottom of it, and then you're running cables along the bottom of the ocean floor. What happens there? What happens to whales? I've looked at a lot of graphs of whale migration patterns in the last 2 years, having these kind of conversations. So these are all legitimate concerns. But what I would say is they're not new. People have been building this kind of offshore wind project in Europe for decades with the same kind of concerns, and we've gotten better and better at them over time. So there are all kinds of technologies being put to use, like sonar and sound bubbles and things with drones, so that even during construction, like if a whale is spotted 2 days away, construction knows when to stop so that that whale can pass by in its standard migratory pattern without being disturbed by wind turbine construction. And there are entire teams at the federal, state, and utility level who are dedicated to making sure that this happens in the most beneficial manner to wildlife possible.
We're talking with self-proclaimed energy nerd Adam Sled, the executive director of the Dominion Energy Innovation Center in Hanover County. We'll hear more about the future of energy in RVA when we come back on RVA's Got Issues.
Fiduciary Edge Advisors, led by Jane DiVincenzo, brings over 25 years of trusted financial guidance to women and families. Fiduciary Edge Advisors will help you organize, grow, and journey confidently to and through retirement. Learn more at 888-605-EDGE or online at fid-edge.com.
There is so much happening in the news every single day. Keep up with it all by subscribing to the VPM Daily Newscast. It's a roundup of Central Virginia's top stories in less than 10 minutes from the VPM News team. The VPM Daily Newscast is available on NPR One or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is RVA's Got Issues. We're back with Adam Sled of the Dominion Energy Innovation Center in Hanover County. Adam, we're talking about this transition to renewable energy. What's this going to actually look like for our listeners? Like, as this gains steam, what's going to be different about their lives or their communities?
What we're looking to do over the next decade or so is start to wind down some of that natural gas, start to wind down the rest of that coal, and continue to ramp up our renewables and probably continue to ramp up our nuclear. Because of advanced manufacturing or because of data centers, we're going to need what's called baseload power. So baseload power means 24/7. And we want that baseload power to be clean, right? We don't want it to be coal. We don't want it to be natural gas necessarily. So if we're looking at 2035, we're going to have more nuclear. We're going to have more nuclear because it is zero carbon emissions and it is 24/7. And I understand there's an argument to be had around nuclear waste and other issues with nuclear, but generally speaking, it is very safe, it is carbon-free, and it runs 24/7. And there is practically no scenario where we get to a net zero economy without adding more nuclear. And Virginia is really well placed to do that because not only do we already have existing nuclear power plants, but we have like an incredible nuclear workforce in the state that I'm not sure everyone appreciates.
And so that's the sort of supply side of things. But on the demand side of things, you mentioned, and we've talked about this a little bit, data centers, right? That seems to be the big concern about like energy draw. It's not just that people are plugging in an extra iPad in their house. It's that these giant facilities need tons of energy all the time to run AI, to run the internet, to do all the computer stuff that we do today. How is that going to shape the future here?
Data centers are a massive economic opportunity, but they do create a massive challenge in terms of how are we going to power them. And, you know, the companies doing these data centers, Google, Meta, Apple, Amazon, you know, the leaders, they all have carbon neutral goals as well. So they're trying to figure this out from their end. And we're going to need as much solar and wind and other renewables as we can. But again, this is where I say, if I had to put money on something, we're going to have more nuclear in the state. The reason we're going to have more nuclear in the state is you can't power the data centers that we're going to power 24/7 without some kind of 24/7 baseload power.
And so what's the role of local governments in all this? What's their role in this whole energy structure?
So what we've done as a state, we've elected politicians, both locally and at a state level, that have promoted a carbon-free economy. And as a result, we have utilities that are moving in that direction, not just Dominion, Appalachian Power, also our co-ops, Old Dominion Electric Co-op, Rappahannock, you know, that serves Hanover and other areas. So our co-ops are going this way too. We're going this way as a state. And while putting solar and a battery on your house is great, buying an EV is great, buying an electric heat pump or electric water heater is great. You know, the best thing you can do is, as a voter, continue to support candidates, if you want, that support those things.
Adam Sled is Executive Director of the Dominion Energy Innovation Center, located in the center of the universe, town of Ashland in Hanover County. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much.
On each episode of RVA's Got Issues, we'll answer a question from listeners like you, something they want or need to know about their government or community. On this episode, RVA's got questions about no soliciting signs. As always, our producer Amber Coles is here to help. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Rich.
Amber, what you got for us?
Okay, so we have a question from an anonymous listener who says, my partner and I purchased a no soliciting sign for our property because of the high number of people knocking on our door. A person who works for the casino came to our home with a survey, this was a while back, and requested our input. She said what she was doing was not soliciting. which appears to be correct per city code. What kind of language should we use instead? I'm assuming to prevent people from knocking on her door.
Right. And already looked up city code, so they're
they're
doing
on
advanced work. Yeah, exactly. So do you understand, you get this no soliciting thing?
I'm assuming it's people trying to get you to buy things or sign up for something.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, it used to be Bible salesmen or vacuum salesmen, and now it is usually more people selling services like gutter guards or pest control or things like that. I'm no lawyer, but it's true. If you have a no soliciting sign, that's to solicit, to ask for something. If people come up to your door and still try to sell you something, they are technically trespassing. In the city of Richmond, that's a Class 1 misdemeanor. Some localities in our area actually require you to get a permit to sell door to door. Richmond does not require that, but Hanover County does, although they have exclusions. So for example, if you are 12 years old or younger, you do not need a permit to go door to door. So you can sell cookies.
Okay, so the Girl Scouts are still allowed to come and sell me my cookies.
That's right. And Hanover does not need to worry about, at least the younger Girl Scouts don't need a permit.
That's important.
Yes. But this listener didn't ask about cookies, even though we're getting hungry thinking about it.
Yeah.
They asked about the casino, right? About someone not selling something, but trying to get you to support a political cause.
Because it's less of you selling a physical thing and more of kind of support. So I can see how there's a very fine line there.
You're right. And so there's an actual different term for that. It's not soliciting. If I come by and knock on your door asking about the casino or my candidacy for office, it's called canvassing.
Where'd we get this from?
Yeah, so this is an old idea. I think you used to use a sheet of canvas to sift out flour. So the idea of canvassing is sorting things out, sifting things out, discussing things. So a canvasser isn't coming to your door to solicit to get your money. They're coming to your door to discuss, to canvass, to ask for your political support. So if you don't want them to do that, you don't need a no soliciting sign. You need a no canvassing sign to keep the canvassers away.
Okay, so you've got a no soliciting for sales, no canvassing for kind of political needs, and then if you don't want anyone to come to your door at all,
then a no trespassing sign actually is your best bet. And that actually would mean you wouldn't have to have a billion signs. You could just have one. So if you have no trespassing, then really no one should come to your door unless you give them explicit permission to ahead of time.
Okay. Now have it next to your beware of the dog sign.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, Amber, what if listeners have another question about their local government or community?
If you have questions, listeners can go to our website at rvasgotissues.vpm.org and click on that Ask a Question button.
Yep. Send us your questions. Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Rich.
For this episode's Community Spotlight, we are excited to have Tariq Kareem, the founder, managing director, artistic director, occasional sound designer, and probably 100 other things for the Black Virginia Theater Alliance. Tariq, welcome.
Hi.
Tariq, there's a kind of longstanding story in movies or TV or theater, something bad is happening. The community center is going to close. Old Man Thompson is foreclosing on Grandma's house. And the only way to stop it is to put on a show. Why are you putting on a show?
Well, we are putting on a show to hopefully make theater more accessible. Ticket prices are insane for theater. And for me, I always loved theater, but didn't have the best accessibility to get it. And I was like, now that I have the opportunity to make some theater, I should make it more accessible for people who are coming up behind me who want to do it or see it.
And so how did this group that you're involved in, the Black Virginia Theater Alliance, how did it start?
So we were in high school, and we were putting on a show, Beauty and the Beast. And
here in Henrico, right?
Yes, Henrico High School. And we didn't like the way that the process was going of auditions and casting. And there were just a lot of inequities in the audition process through and through, and the show as well. And so we were like, well, it's senior year, we're about to graduate anyways. Let's raise some hell. And so we decided to start a GoFundMe, and we raised money, and we got in contact with some colleges. We formed a little small cohort of us who all felt the same. And we produced our first show, which was the Tiana Experience.
The Tiana Experience, how is that different from just a standard, musical that a high school would put on?
So, it was making sure that equity was installed in our processes. And so we did our audition processes much differently. We auditioned kind of blindly to a lot of factors that sometimes people bring into the rooms with them. We also made sure that our prices were really, really great. And so we got like such large capacities of people to come because they were like, well, we couldn't see this Disney show because it cost this much. And so we have a theater to come to now. It was also a Black story and a Black princess, and seeing the little kids light up when they saw a princess come on stage every night was a life-changing experience. Also, everyone who was a part of the process, who were doing all the backing and the work, were about 17 to 18 years old. And so to have a space that was completely ran by people of color and Gen Z, it was magical, honestly.
And you've also described it to our producers as the hardest thing that you've ever done in your life, right? Does that go along with that?
Yes, it was so stressful because we were responsible at that point basically for about 40 kids. And mind you, all of us were still seniors in high school. And so this is the time where you're getting ready for life, you're getting ready for college, you're trying to figure out what's next. And we decided to start a theater company in the middle of that. So we were managing our own finances, we were managing our own operation and facilities, all the things we were doing as like a group of about 4 of us.
What else are you facing in terms of obstacles?
Gen Z was like kind of going into this streaming world. You have Netflix and you have Hulu and you have all these things where you don't have to come and buy a ticket and see our show. And so we want to figure out how to overcome that and create a space where they hopefully want to come and take theater and it isn't through a screen.
And so how have you kept it going?
Currently, we are Richmond's only Black-owned theater that's in operation. If you look at, a lot of the largest theater seasons, you don't see that many Black shows. And so just providing the opportunity and space for Black actors, Black performers, Black scene designers, et cetera, to be like, hey, come, this is a space for you, let's make some art. That alone has been such a large way for us to reach our Black arts community. We invite all people to our audiences. We don't exclude anyone. And so when you may not be a person of color, but you experience one of our shows, you start to ask questions. You start to want to have conversations.
And so what are your plans for the future? What's coming down the pike for the Black Theater Alliance?
We are producing Women in Ebony. It's a season that's dedicated to Black women and protecting Black women. All the shows will be Black playwrights, Black women playwrights specifically, and all of the main leads will be Black women. And next season, we really, really, really want to hone in on our activism and advocacy, figuring out ways how to collaborate with other nonprofit organizations to see how we can help and aid them in their processes. A lot of other younger people are realizing, I can start something or I can start a nonprofit. And so we're also looking into channels of how to have a program where teens or youth can be able to learn how can we make our own organization to be able to feed whatever needs there are.
And so where can people find your shows, your performances?
We are all over Richmond. We're in the Art District. We'll have a show at Virginia Repertory Theater Gym next season. We actually have a show also happening in the Henrico Theater next season. We do a few pop-ups that are like in parks, but we don't say anything because we want it just to be a surprise. You can look on our social medias and website to see where we are specifically next season.
Tariq Karim is founder of the Black Virginia Theater Alliance. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
That's our show. Thanks to our guests, Adam Sled and Tariq Karim. RVA's got issues, but we need you to tell us what those issues are. Submit a question or tell us about something exciting going on in your community at our website, rvasgotissues.vpm.org. Join us next time when RVA's Got Issues with, well, if you want to know, subscribe to us wherever you download podcasts. RVA's Got Issues is produced by Max Wasserman and Amber Coles and edited by Steve Lack. Our theme music was composed by Alexander Hitchens. Meg Lindholm is our executive producer. Steve Humble is VPM's chief content officer. I'm your host, Rich Marr. Thanks for listening.
VPM.